And then I will say hi, everybody. My name is Jack Packard.
I'm Darren Mooney.
And I'm KC Nwosu.
KC, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm glad to be here. I am, if you don't know, one of the 3-minute reviewers for the video game side of Escapist. Other than that, I stream a bunch of video games for the Escapist as well as on my own, so you can check that out on my Twitch channel, SigmaGears9, or just follow me on Twitter. You'll see all the other nonsense that I do on a regular basis.
And we love that you are here this week for the Escapist Movie Podcast. We are talking about the legacy of Toy Story, as last week was its 25th anniversary. Then we will move on to the franchising of A Quiet Place. I almost forgot the name of it, even though I just watched the movie yesterday. And then finally, we will delve into the first 3 episodes of The Mandalorian to see how we think season 2 is Star Warsing out. This is how much thought I put into these intros. I'm making it up as I go along, but in any case, hello and welcome. This is the Escapist Movie Podcast.
Jazz hands.
See, Casey gets
Sorry,
it.
this looks like I'm terrified actually when I do this. Sorry, I can't really fit me in the frame.
My worst fear, jazz.
Sorry. If I push back, I can do it.
There you go. Jazz hands, one of the most misunderstood forms of entertainment. So first, let's talk about Toy Story and let's talk about Pixar. Really, Toy Story, Pixar in general, creating another genre of animation where one did not exist beforehand by using some very simple tricks of just telling a good story. If you look at like any of the old like behind the scenes for Toy Story 1 or even like the little animated shorts that they made before Toy Story, they always complained that the technology was never very good. Like, oh yeah, our characters didn't look very good, but what we found out is people didn't really care about that because we made amusing little stories and had fun characters. And I think that's kind of what they did with Toy Story 1.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about Pixar is that, like, the most obvious headline-grabbing fact about Pixar is that they basically mainlined computer-generated animation and kind of, like, made it, like, the default mode of, like, American animation going forward, to the point where, like, even Disney movies are now animated in the style of Pixar movies. But I think that, like, despite that, I would argue their most enduring legacy is the realization that animated movies, particularly, and again, I want to be very clear on this, American animated movies in particular, because I know the Japanese animated movies are a different thing and European animated movies are a different thing unto themselves, but traditionally speaking, American animation, particularly American animated movies, were seen as a medium primarily aimed at children, and the idea was if you were a parent, you were taking your kids to see it to keep them quiet for a couple of hours, possibly while you fell asleep under the warm glow of the cinema screen. And I think that, like, one of the big innovations of Pixar is not the computer-generated animation, it's what you alluded to there. It's the 22 rules of storytelling. It's the idea that you can construct a movie that is animated but works as, and I apologize for using the phrase, but I'm going to, as a real movie, or what people would describe as a real movie. In that, like, you can make a movie that is constructed in the exact same way that you would construct a prestige piece, a live action piece, a movie aimed at discerning adults, and aim it at kids and expect parents to watch it and not only just be glad that their kids are being quiet for 2 hours, but also, like, enjoy the movie on its own terms. And I think that is the enduring legacy and appeal of Pixar. And I'd argue that, like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna agree with you entirely in that sense because, like as a parent, I don't want to be bored by the thing that I'm sitting next to my kid watching, and Pixar movies tend to be good for all ages, just in that way. I do personally have a little bit of resentment towards Pixar, though, for the exact same thing you said. The fact that they kind of like pointed every other animation studio in the direction of CG animation. Yeah. And I was a really, really big fan of 2D animation. Yeah. And just like you mentioned, Japan maybe doesn't do it as much. You're starting to see some of that with a lot of those Netflix anime series. Yeah. They're starting to move into the more CG stuff. But I do really kind of resent them because I really did love them. They also kind of stripped out the music, but that's a whole other story. Like there are less musicals now because of this.
I do love a good Disney musical, absolutely.
Right, yeah. But Disney kind of started copying Pixar after they picked them up, and now they, for the most part, they don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a hole I think that needs to be filled still.
I think like Pixar has definitely ruined every other children's movie, you know, especially if you are a parent, and you know, kids have terrible taste. That's like the nature of children is they don't
no
have taste.
Yeah, they have no taste. Like it's like you can't blame the kids for having bad taste, Jack.
I can and I will.
I fall. I'm guilty of this too. Like I'll tell my kid, like, why are you watching this? This is awful. Like watch something good. Watch something with a story.
Can't we watch Wall-E again? Again, Dad. And so I think like that's a really interesting point. And, you know, it is, of course, something that Pixar had to fight for. If anyone, you know, the very famous story of Disney, who was distributing the Toy Story for Pixar, was trying to force Toy Story to be edgier than it ended up being. They were trying to make Woody a big jerk because, we need an edgy character. That's what sells with the kids now. And you have like the first draft of Toy Story being a miserable slog because Woody is an asshole.
I just, before we move off this, I want to come back to this. I want to throw this out to the group, right? Tom Hanks is basically America's dad. He's like, he's the embodiment of kind of like an ideal of a certain form of American perfection. He has a very particular type of role that he plays, and that role is fairly conventional. It's a Tom Hanks role. Even when Tom Hanks is playing like a hitman in Road to Perdition, he's still Tom Hanks somehow. Here is what I want to throw out to the group, right? Is Woody from Toy Story basically like the kind of like Tom Hanks version of Denzel Washington in Training Day? Is it like Tom Hanks going against type? Is it asking you to accept Tom Hanks as a bit of an asshole? And like, is that one of the more interesting and underrated aspects of Toy Story as a film?
I think in its original conception, yes, it would have been asking too much of us as an audience to believe that Tom Hanks would be that big of an asshole. But they tempered it enough in the final version where Tom Hanks is cranky, yes, but understandably so.
Right. Yeah. I think in general you can relate with Woody and like his sense of this guy is new. He doesn't get what's going on here, and I need to show him. Like more so than Buzz. Honestly, I feel like Buzz is kind of the jerk in that situation, and knowing that Tim Allen is the voice, like you're kind of predisposed to thinking of him as a jerk in that sense. But yeah, like I don't really see Tom Hanks as being pushed too far out of his comfort zone in that sense.
All right. Because I mean, that was my big like watching Toy Story. It's like Woody is an asshole. Like he's an asshole in a relatable way, and in a way that, as you point out, we understand and is completely motivated. But I think that he is like he's obnoxious. He has these moments of weakness that I don't see any other Tom Hanks character, including, for example, the Hitman in Road to Perdition, which is just the one I keep coming back to. Like the Hitman in Road to Perdition is a nicer human being than the toy in Toy Story, perhaps I would argue. I find that kind of interesting that like you do have that kind of push and pull where Woody is allowed to be just I don't think he's edgy. He's not hip or cool or with it or kind of gritty or dark, but he's obnoxious in a way that regular people are, and which I don't think I still expect Tom Hanks to ever be.
I think they found Woody's character more as the movies went on. I think a lot of the dickhead that comes across in Toy Story 1 is just remnants from that first script draft they had where they were told by producers that he needs to be edgier. He needs, we need a darker character. We need an edgier character. And a lot of that just was kept in the final version. But, you know, once you get to Toy Story 2 even, Woody has calmed immeasurably, you know, like is questioning his loyalty, is so much more the Woody that we thought he was in Toy Story 1. But I agree, like going back to 1, Woody's a dickhead.
Yeah.
I would honestly argue that Woody is more of a dick in 4. Like I saw that very recently, and that movie is kind of all about everyone else going against what Woody is perceiving as, you know, the truth of the situation. And like they kind of give him some leeway because he's sort of right in a lot of what he's doing and trying to do. but like he's kind of doing it for the wrong reasons, and it takes the entire movie for him to come to that realization.
Yeah,
Are we gonna have words about Toy Story 4? Is
No,
this what's about to happen?
Okay, we're gonna have words about Toy Story 4. No, I agree. Like, I agree with I actually agree about Casey and Jack in that I would argue that like the wonderful thing about the Toy Story movies is that now that they're not a trilogy, they're almost like a kind of a Russian doll effect, where 2 and 3 are quite similar to one another in that they're ensemble genre pieces. In that they're like they're the group heads out and they basically try and rescue Woody, or the group has to break out of daycare, that sort of thing, and it's got a real emphasis on the group dynamic. Whereas 1 and 4 are, I would argue, more particularly Woody movies, in that they're about Woody as a character and his journey as an individual. Now, obviously, it's there in 2 and it's there in 3, but it's secondary. It's not the driving force of the action, whereas in 4 it very much is. And I think Casey's entirely right in that, like, the interesting thing about 4, and I genuinely adore this about 4, is that 4 is about, like, an old guy who won't get out of his own way. It's about a guy who's basically used to things being done a particular way and used to being the guy who does things a particular way, and refusing to accept that maybe things are a little different now and he should step back a little and let other people do what they need to do while he just enjoys kind of, being old and respected. And I love that, like, again, that's the kind of, like, that's the thing with the Tom Hanks. Like, it's the perfect level of, like, Tom Hanks assholery. I would never buy like Tom Hanks doing Daniel Day-Lewis style method acting in Gangs of New York, but I can just about buy Tom Hanks being slightly out of touch in Toy Story 4. Like,
it's like you respect him, where he's coming from, but it's like, look, would you just listen to everybody else for a change?
Just once, yeah.
Like, I think Toy Story 4 is one of the most perfect allegories for someone who is in an abusive relationship. And so, like, I got, for those of you just listening to this, I just got noticeable winces from both Darren and KC.
No, I'm intrigued.
I want to know who is abusing whom in this relationship, and like where Woody falls in this dynamic. So
and you know what? If I can soft walk that, Woody is in a unhealthy relationship with Bonnie. He is in a one-sided relationship like. I think there's abuse in there, in that like Woody feels trapped in the relationship. Like, oh, I need to keep giving to my kid, right? To my partner in this, to Bonnie, and not realizing that he can go off and do his own thing because he is no longer a partner like he was with Andy, right? And so the allegory I feel in Toy Story 4 is that, Woody is in this one-sided relationship with Bonnie out of necessity, out of like a loyalty that is unearned from Bonnie.
Wow!
Is that?
I love that we're just laying into Bonnie. Yeah, it's like, take that, Bonnie, knock you down a peg or two.
Bonnie tosses Woody aside, even though he is giving 300% to Bonnie. She doesn't even notice him. That is an unhealthy relationship,
and she never asks for it, I would say, is the problem there. Now, hold on. Now, what?
Exactly.
Okay. How I would argue Toy Story, I love that we've gone straight into the weeds, just straight to Toy Story 4. But it's like, how I've always seen Toy Story 4 is like as a metaphor for, and maybe a bit lighter than Jack is framing it, but for like the discussion of what happens when your child leaves home. And again, I'm not a parent here, I'm a child in this situation. So it's like watching your parents try to figure out what the hell they do now that like their primary reason, or the way that they've largely defined themselves for a number of years, is gone. So like when your child leaves home and goes to college, and you're no longer defined primarily as a parent, you're no longer defined by your role as caregiver to this other person. What does that mean? How do you acclimatize to that? How do you become a fully functioning person after that again? You have to figure out, are you going to live with this person? The relationship between you and your partner changes dynamically as well, because you both have to feel out the relationship. That's how I always saw Toy Story 4, and I always thought that it was kind of like perfect in that sense, and that it was very much like Woody as helicopter dad for Bonnie, and accepting that like Bonnie didn't need him. And, like, he needed Bonnie to need him more than he needed anything else. Because if Bonnie didn't need him, he didn't know what he was. That's always how I kind of figured the relationship was with Woody. I wasn't quite as dark. And I love that Jack's like, they went too dark and gritty in Toy Story 1. I want the one where it's a metaphor for an abusive relationship. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can see the readings in both ways. But I do think Darren has a point that Bonnie never necessarily kind of signed up for what Woody wanted. like he was coming off of the thing with Andy, and that was, I guess, kind of traumatizing for him that Andy had to, because they came to terms with it for a while. Like I think in 3, like Andy had stopped playing with them for a very long time already.
Mm-hmm.
So like they were already kind of in a vapid space of not knowing what their future was. And then Bonnie was like a new lease on life that they thought would be like, yes, now we can get this over again. And Woody was kind of the only one left out. So like, yeah, he was very, very nebulous, but like that wasn't Bonnie's fault. Like she's a child.
Allegory, metaphor here. No, of course she's a child. Like I guess, you know, like
She probably also had poor
thinking...
taste, Jack. She probably also had terrible taste.
You know, like 4 is this beautiful little like aftershock of 3 because like again, you know, looking at it from a relationship standpoint, like, you know, Woody is not getting what he needs from Andy, and you know, his side piece Bonnie, he gets a little playtime in there, right? And it's a whole new world, and decides to, you know, move on because Andy's moved on. And then like his side piece isn't really into the relationship like he was. And so this 4 is like the aftershock of that, where things actually settle down.
Like after the divorce with the hot new girlfriend, all of a sudden it's like, you know what? This isn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be.
Look, honey, I got the paperwork signed. Why? Oh, you're not into this anymore? No. Oh.
I'm really not into your Jesse roleplay, apparently, is what I'm getting from the subtext here. What I will say, actually, like, that's the thing that I really admire about, to bring it back to Toy Story, the original Toy Story, the one that's 25 years old, is that, like, it is very transparently, like, a story about divorce. It's very much a story about a family unit that's not working, told through the allegory of toys. And that, like, again, much has been made of the fact that Andy's father's missing, and Woody is implicitly one of the toys that belong to his father because he's an original 1950s toy, and there's no way that he could have been bought specifically for Andy. It has to be a hand-me-down. But so you have this kind of, like, the first one is very much that metaphor of, you know, well, there's a new dad on the scene, and he's played by Tim Allen, and he's shiny and kind of dumb, but he's very well-intentioned and enthusiastic about what he's doing. And what does that mean for kind of the guy who's always been dad, the guy who's basically always been in charge of organizing stuff, and how does he figure that out? And I quite like that, you know, you have a children's movie that is essentially about, like, two men figuring out their relationship to the child that they basically have to share now. Which is,
right.
Absolutely.
Again, like, in the context of a film released in 1995, we talked about, like, the Addams Family last week and how unconventional family units that was. This is the same sort of thing, but an animated film aimed at, like, 3 or 4-year-olds. It's amazing.
Oh, and, you know, as someone who grew up with a lot of divorce in their household, multiple divorces in their household, like, the fact that we have the two father figures, the father and the stepfather figure, also, like, working it out in the end. So many movies from the 80s and 90s, like, you have the divorced dad who's trying to see his kid, and the stepdad's a real jerk and remains to be a real jerk for the entire movie. But here's like, no, we're all humans here, and we all have to work together. So like, messages upon messages and positivity in this space of allegorical divorce is something that is very unusual.
I think that is, once again, like, the secret of Pixar as a whole is, like, they take the term family movie at face value rather than the coded version of this is for kids. Like, it's a family movie because the entire family can get something out of it. And, like, they tend to keep doing that. Like, it's really hard to think of, like, a bad Pixar movie. I know that there are some, but none come to mind because they tend to always tell a story that is kind of universally understandable or accepted and just plain good, like, kind of for all ages. Like, I can't think of a Pixar movie that I've seen with my son that he didn't also like as much as I did.
I think, like, if we're thinking of the lower end of things, I think, like, for my kids love Cars 2. It's their favorite. As an adult, Cars 2 is just the worst.
Cars 2 is about how you need to accept your friend, even when he's horribly racist, won't listen to anybody else, and is just an obnoxious jerk. The most important thing in Cars 2 is you stand by your friend, no matter how awful a person he is. It's a very strange children's movie.
Very strange movie. And I know, like...
So clearly I didn't see Cars 2. Because Had no idea that that's what's going on in that franchise.
Oh yeah, no, like and Cars 3, which we just saw recently, like really turns it around, and is about like accepting the fact that you're not the hottest anymore and taking on more of a mentor role. Very, very nice movie, Cars 3. And I would say for me personally, I put Brave on the bottom tier of Pixar movies. If you guys can even remember Brave.
No, I actually liked Brave.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I didn't think it was. I knew it had like a lot of heat before it came into it, but I thought it was one of the rare instances of like a mother-daughter relationship. But they do that thing where rather than letting the mother and daughter kind of hash it out the whole movie, they turn somebody into another thing that can't really talk. So like you lose a lot of the direct relationship, and then it kind of turns into more of a one-sided realization thing. Because that was what it was for me. It was Merida over time realizing, I've been really hard on my mom, and now that my mom is going through all this stuff, I miss her, and I would really like it if she was around for this situation. Like, you don't really get that till like the very end.
Yeah. Sure.
And in defense of Brave, what I'll say the problem for me with Brave is that like it was Pixar moving into the space traditionally associated with Disney, which is the idea of the princess movie and the idea of these movies focused on young women. But it arrived at the same time that Disney was also pushing its own princess movies into more of a Pixar space. So films like, say, Tangled, for example, films like Frozen, films like Moana and stuff like that, which were perhaps like they were meeting halfway on the other end. So it felt like a regression. For me, it felt a little bit like a kind of a slight regression for Pixar to go to emulating Disney, while Disney were making a step forward and trying to emulate Pixar. And that was my issue with Brave. What I will say back to kind of Casey's point about Pixar, and I want to be absolutely clear, this is a very qualified criticism that I'm about to make, but it is something that I am a little bit wary about, a little bit concerned about, and I don't want to make too big a deal of it. But over the past couple of years, we've seen this big push in Pixar, particularly since they're bought by Disney, and particularly in recent years since Disney has become the company that it is today, this push towards gigantic sequels, and this push towards reiterating and repeating formulas. I mean, you mentioned that there are 3 Cars movies. I do love that Pixar eventually said no, and Disney had to do, okay, we'll make planes on our own then, fine. But, over the past couple of years, we've had movies like, say, and again, I like Finding Dory, for example, but it's still a sequel, and I'd still argue it's not, like, as good as Finding Nemo or many of the originals.
That's near the bottom for me, too, yeah.
Like, I love Toy Story 4, but again, I don't know if I needed it, for example. Things like
I don't think anyone was waiting for Toy
Toy
Story 4. It just showed up.
And I was glad that it did. But movies like The Incredibles...
I did not hate it,
Yeah, no, I loved it. But I mean, even things like, say, okay, movies I didn't love as much, like, say, The Incredibles 2, for example, or Incredibles 2, because they dropped the for some reason. It's one of the great movie title weird things that bothers me. It was The Incredibles, but Incredibles 2. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't need to. But yeah, it was okay, but it was not as good as The Incredibles. And then you also even have films like, for example, Monsters University, which I would argue is one of the lower tier Pixar films, which is a sequel to, Monsters Inc., which is one of the great Pixar films. And it's okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. No.
If I can, I'm going to defend Monsters University.
Okay.
But I'm also going to defend a lot of the sequels, except for Cars 2. In that, yes, I believe they were forced to make them, but in each of the sequels, Pixar decided to do something a little subversive and a little interesting. With Cars 3 and Toy Story 4, it was about removing one of the main characters, the most popular characters, to elevate a lesser known female character. That's kind of a big deal in these movies. Monsters University, the theme for Monsters University is sometimes you can't be the rock star and it's okay to be the roadie. And that's like a great message. It's like a great message of like, yeah, sometimes you can't do the thing you want. Find a space that you can help. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful message. Incredibles 2, all about like rebalancing the nuclear family again, elevating the secondary, if you will, female character to a more main space. And so like they're using these forced sequels as opportunities? ?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. I don't hate any of these movies. To be clear, I'm not the Grinch stealing Christmas here, Jack. I'm just saying, like the great Pixar movies are like the best movies ever. Like WALL-E or Inside Out or Finding Nemo, even a couple of the early Toy Stories and things like that. And it's like these movies are good, and it's like, what if we, instead of making like 4 good movies, we'd let them make 1 great movie? How would that work for people? Now, to be fair, it does seem to be getting better. Like, I mean, because you had Onward this year, which was an original film, which was, maybe not peak Pixar, but I quite enjoyed. And you've got Soul coming up in December on Christmas Day on Disney Plus, which I am so excited about. I'm so excited about. Soul.
Yeah, I'm kind of lukewarm on Soul.
Okay.
Weirdly enough, like it. I don't know. I'll probably change my mind once I actually see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, because I do like that Pixar kind of goes their own way. Like every movie that's not a sequel is kind of like an entirely new situation. But there is always that core point that we seem to keep picking out of each one. Like, oh, this one was about 2 friends learning how to get along. This one's about a father and a son. This one's about a that core is in all of them, and I think that is what they do best. And when they get a second chance at it, I just wonder if they feel it's like a pressure thing. Because like, I feel like you do have, since you built a framework already, just like Jack is saying, you have a good opportunity to kind of subvert it or to twist it or to turn it on its head in some way that makes it better than the original. I know that's not always the case with like movies, specifically like sequel movies, but I do feel like for example, and this isn't actually a Pixar movie, but the How to Train Your Dragon series, I think, is absolutely fantastic. It's probably, in my opinion, better than a lot of the Pixar ones, even.
I mean, it's very good. They're very good movies.
They are very good.
It's really, really good. But I feel like the sequel kind of outdoes the original, and it's because and spoilers, I guess, if you haven't seen it. Like, there's a whole third one out, but the first one is about kind of like a rocky relationship between a son and a father, and then the second one takes the father away.
Yeah.
So it's like at the end of that first movie, like they kind of came to an understanding. Their relationship had mended, and then he's gone, and like that kind of hits you in a way that they would not have had the chance to do if it wasn't a sequel. And like, I feel like Pixar is more than capable of doing things like that.
No, and I think like the amazing thing that both the How to Train Your Dragon movies and the later Pixar sequels do, and we'll get into this more when we talk Mandalorian, is move the characters forward. They move the story forward in such a way where I know like a lot of people were really upset with Toy Story 4 as far as like Woody, leaving the kid. And it's like, guess what? That's a character arc. That's him moving forward. That's something Batman doesn't do because Batman still needs to be Batman, but they can do it in these movies. And that's so important.
Yeah. It's an arc, not a circle. And I will second Casey's recommendation that you go and see How to Train Your Dragon. I don't know why anybody would be dragging their feet on that one. But no, and actually,
son of a bitch.
And Casey does actually, he brings up a good point actually there, which is that like one of the more interesting things is watching other studios learn from Pixar, and not just the computer generated animation, because obviously you have like Sony have their in-house animation, Illumination, they have like, obviously we mentioned DreamWorks as well, but like learning the storytelling and learning that you can make movies that adults will want to watch, not just kids. And so things like How to Train Your Dragon, and I would actually go to bat for Kung Fu Panda, the original Kung Fu Panda, as like another example of a studio that has learned, like, go back, like, I know that, not to speak for you two, I don't know what ages you are, and I don't want to presume or judge, but like, as somebody who as a child watched like The Land Before Time and was like, this is my childhood, The Land Before Time is not a good movie, but I feel like,
I've never liked those movies.
Yeah. To be fair, some of them were animated in Dublin, so I'm obliged to like them. But no, it's also, but it's like you go back and you watch those movies, and you watch children's movies today, even ones that aren't Pixar, and it's just a huge leap forward. It's a massive leap forward in terms of like just being entertaining, being well constructed. As Jack pointed, having clear character arcs, having story structure, having themes, having ideas, having like metaphors, understanding that action has to flow in a particular direction, having a clear 3-act structure. All these things that you take for granted watching like good movies as an adult, but realizing you can put them in movies for children and they will still work, and the children will still go see them. And I think like that is, I think Jack was quite right opening the segment. That's the legacy of Pixar as much as anything to do with computer generated animation. It's figuring out that you can make movies that are like homages to like great Hollywood cinema that are bold, that are ambitious, that are weird, that have characters who grow and who change and who evolve, and which say things that are more profound than, you know, I don't know, wouldn't it be great if we had an adventure with T-Rexes in it? And it's still, they still work, and it's beautiful. And yet that would be like my big takeaway on like Pixar's kind of contribution 25 years after the fact.
Awesome.
I think that's a great way to wrap that segment up. Way to go, Pixar!
Yeah,
Keep on, keep it on.
You did it,
Pixar.
yeah,
You did it. Nice.
Best 25th birthday party ever. It's like, if I had any advice for you, it would be that you don't need any advice from me because you're doing grand.
Doing great.
Yeah.
Keep doing it. Keep doing it. All right. Well, now we will move on to the franchise starter, to the new franchise starter, apparently in A Quiet Place. And I need to be completely transparent with you. The very first time I watched A Quiet Place was last night.
We are professionals here.
It's been on my list of movies to watch for a while. It wasn't spoiled for me, which is frankly shocking. I know this was like the big hit, the big horror hit the year it came out. And I have to say, like, meh. Like it's fine. It's a perfectly fine movie. I can understand why a lot of people really liked it. I can't imagine a sequel to this movie being anywhere near as good as this one, and this one's pretty meh. That's how I'm kicking off the A Quiet Place segment.
Okay, I'll jump in here on this one very quickly. And what I will say.
Hold on, I see Casey leaning in, so
yeah.
we're gonna.
Okay, well, Casey, do you want to go first?
No. Go by all means, Darren.
Let's tag team. Okay, I'll soften him up and you can finish him off. All right, so Jack, what I would say just very briefly to that is that the thing about The Quiet Place is that it is probably a movie that is best seen at least with a large group of people, but primarily probably best seen in a cinema. In that, I think I mentioned this on a podcast that we recorded earlier in the year. One of my favorite recent cinematic memories was seeing The Quiet Place in a packed cinema full of people. And these are people, you know, again, people who've been to cinemas, you know how it works. You have people rustling in bags, slurping on Coke, having those bags that are really noisy to open. For some reason, that cinema bags are always designed to be really noisy when they open and crinkle. But when you watch A Quiet Place, if you're in a large crowd, and I watched it 3 or 4 times when it came out because it was like, that was such a good experience, you'll notice that, like, you can hear a pin drop during the points in which kind of the movie requires the audience to be quiet. The audience buys into the premise of The Quiet Place immediately, because The Quiet Place is one of those movies very much like, is it Lights Out, for example, is one of them, and I think It Follows is another one as well, where they're movies that are designed to play on the formula, language, and expectations that audiences have of horror movies, in that they're very much about the rules of horror movies. Bird Box is another one as well on Netflix, where they basically weaponize the way in which audiences look and think about movies, which is, so if you're watching a scary movie, what is your first instinct when something horrible comes up on screen? It's to cover your eyes or to look away, right? So movies like, say, Lights Out and movies like Bird Box have monsters that either you can't look at directly in Bird Box, or if you look away, like in Lights Out, will move close and catch you. So you have to look. You're compelled to look. That's the entire hook of it. And then you have like movies like A Quiet Place, which is, these are monsters that will hunt you if you scream. What do you do if you're watching a scary movie and something startling happens? You scream. So you weaponize the process of kind of watching a movie. So as an audience member, you implicitly buy into it. And again, it's instinctive. It's not necessarily logical, but you buy into the fact that I'm watching a really scary movie. I am not going to make a noise during it, because if I do, the monsters on the other side of the screen in this pre-recorded movie are going to hear me and attack me. No, but you basically buy into the concept of it. And I've never seen an audience buy as hard into the concept of a horror movie as they did watching A Quiet Place. And I mean, it happened as well when I watched it at home with a large group of family and friends as well. My mother, who is constantly asking questions during the movie, actually leaned over at one point and whispered as if the movie might hear her if she were to speak louder. And again, it's something that's hard to quantify and hard to replicate, but I think like that's what I really loved about it. It's a movie that almost demands a theatrical experience, or at least a large audience. But sorry, Casey, I cut you off.
Oh, no. I really wasn't going to jump down Jack's throat or anything, because I actually did enjoy A Quiet Place. And for me, I I tend to not like horror movies much at all. Like I tend to find most of them to just be either boring or they focus too much on like either the shock or like the gore and the deaths and whatnot. And that's never something that I come to a movie to see. What I liked about A Quiet Place was that like you mentioned, Darren, like it was toying with the rules of horror movies, and also it very much made sense within its own universe. Like it followed the rules that it set up about, you know, being quiet and monsters hearing this thing or that thing and whatnot. And it made that make sense in a way that was believable, so that this, you know, middle America family who, you know, went through some tragedy over the course of the movie, like did stand a chance of surviving in this situation based on what they were doing. Like it all made sense and tied together, which made it a compelling story to me. So in that sense, I really liked it. But in terms of it becoming a franchise, that is odd. I remember seeing the trailer for 2 and was kind of like confused. Like, wait, they're making a second one? Like the way the first one ended seemed kind of definitive. But from the little bits that it showed, I got the impression that this was some sort of, if not a sequel, it would at very least have like a bunch of flashbacks in it. Because it seemed like they were going back to maybe sometime before, like when all of it started. In which case, I'm afraid they'd maybe want to over-explain like these creatures and what's going on, and that's probably just going to end in a bad time.
But it's also the fact that like the first one was a surprise hit that made lots of money. I think that the quote from Michael Bay is, "I was astonished when something with platinum dunes in front of it made a shed load of money and got great reviews." But like the fact is, like The Quiet Place was a massive breakout box office hit, as Jack pointed out. So it really feels like when you watch that trailer, it's like, well, we got a shed load of sweet budget money. Let's show the stuff that we couldn't show for budget reasons in the first movie, like the actual attack or invasion or instigating incident in this thing. And I think Casey's entirely right. There's a real sense of you're missing what was so great about the first movie. If that's what that's where the first place you go is, let's make this a big epic blockbuster franchise. It's like, no, it was the fact that it was a small family living on a small farm trying to be as quiet as possible was what made this work. You don't scale that upwards. That's not a concept that you scale louder and bigger.
Agreed. And now, of course, like the whole reason why we're talking about this is like not only is the sequel, unfortunately, was kind of gobbled up in the forever pushback of all of the movies that were supposed to come out this year, but not only is the sequel ready to be released at any moment, they are talking about making a third A Quiet Place movie for some reason.
The quietest place.
And like, I guess before we get too far in here, when I say that this is a meh movie, I say I'm not. That's not like saying this is a bad movie. It's just saying like this is a perfectly adequate movie, but it's a trick. The movie is it's quite literally a theater game that we play to warm up called Silent Tension. That's it. Like it's a magic trick, and everyone has seen this magic trick before. It's done very well. It's a very good looking movie. It's produced very well, but you know what it is.
kind of a one trick pony type situation.
Oh, it's literally a one trick pony, and now they're like, guess what pony's back? Eh? It's gonna be quiet.
I love a quiet pony.
I love, by the way, that Jack's imagining an alternate universe where like Silent Tension now has a spin-off being directed by Jeff Nichols as well. But no, I think Jack's kind of like onto something there in terms of like this being how do you franchise this concept? The concept is the movie. There's no need, like, if you want that same concept, just rewatch the movie, re-release the movie. And I mean, like, this is the thing where it's a Paramount movie, and for those who watch the industry know that Paramount is not in a strong position as far as the major studios go. It's not as like, it doesn't have a comic book franchise much like say Warner Brothers or Disney do. It doesn't have Star Wars like Disney do. It doesn't even have the Dark Universe or Fast and Furious like the Universal do. Paramount have been kind of like struggling for a while, and they tried to turn back in the early 2000s. They tried to turn Star Trek into their big blockbuster franchise with a series of summer movies, and that kind of pittered out with Beyond. But the issue is that, like, so Paramount basically have nothing but Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible now. That's why they greenlit 2 Mission Impossible sequels simultaneously, because because if the first one fails, it doesn't matter anyway. It's the game's up. So you could, like, there's a real sense of, well, okay, The Quiet Place. Yeah, we could talk a lot about Paramount. Listeners who are not familiar with Paramount's money woes, Google monster trucks and read the story behind monster trucks. It is beautiful. Apparently, some executive's 8-year-old son came up with the concept, and they decided it was a couple.
I heard that.
Yeah.
You know what? Not the worst movie. Not the worst movie, Monster Trucks.
Yeah, but
Going back to talking about kids movie, I've seen Monster Trucks. Tom Lennon's in it. You know, he's working. That's great.
I feel like you could probably get Tom Lennon to work for a bit less than a couple of $100 million on the front end, Jack. But anyway, so Paramount, like, the fact is Paramount are in a situation where this surprise movie that cost no money whatsoever made a shed load. The instinctive response is, well, we can't afford not to franchise this. Like, it's literally like, we got the lever marked Tom Cruise. Well, of course we're going to install the lever marked Quiet Place. That's what we're going to do now. And like, that's it. And like, to be honest, this is the thing similar to what we mentioned with, I think we talked about Ben Wheatley a couple of weeks ago, where Ben Wheatley jumped right on the franchise train. I'm just glad that Jeff Nichols is getting some sweet franchise cash here. Because Nichols is basically, if you're not familiar with his work, he's been doing a lot of great work on the indie scene in the past couple of years. Things like, I think, Take Shelter with Michael Shannon, Mud with Matthew McConaughey, which was a huge part of the McConaissance, which is massively underrated.
I'm sorry, the McConaissance?
Right, you just kind of glossed over that. Like,
you just said that like that's
just
a thing.
A thing people just know of. The McConaissance.
It was a very important movement in cinema. It's like, people talk about like New Hollywood, Classic Hollywood, the pre-code era. They'll talk about the McConaissance is the era that runs roughly from about 2010 to 2013, where Matthew McConaughey proved that he could actually act, involving such highlights as, say, Wolf of Wall Street, Interstellar, and also even like some smaller movies like, say, Lincoln Lawyer, some indie work like Killer Joe, and you know, I would argue that the movie that I mentioned there, which was Mud, was a vital kind of part of that. But in terms of, say, so yeah, Jeff Nichols, vital and important part of the McConaissance, to be absolutely clear.
I love it.
And like, if listeners have not seen a Jeff Nichols movie, he did Midnight Special, which is fantastic and well worth seeking out, and has an amazing cast. Michael Shannon's in it, Adam Driver's in it. It's brilliant. It is well worth your time if you can find it online. If you can find it, buy it digitally or whatever. So I'm kind of glad that he's getting some of that sweet Quiet Place money, even if, like, there's no reason. There's no just, like, I would rather just give him the money and tell him to make any movie he wants, as opposed to give...
just do something else with the money, because you proved you could do a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I do think if they are going to bank on the name, that's what it is.
Yeah.
People know A Quiet Place, so they want the name to sell more than they care about the quality of a movie. I do think there is a pathway for it to work, where if they kind of, and this might be cheap, but they try to copy the formula of the first movie, like, different family, different situation. See how they handled, this stretch of time where a year has passed in this situation with, the hearing aliens or whatever. And
the Death Angels, I want to say.
I don't even remember what they were called.
There's a newspaper that called them the Angels of Death, I want to say.
More like the Angels of Death. Am I right?
Okay,
sorry.
I like that. I like that one.
Did it?
That was good. But no, like, basically some other family, right? And how they cope with it. Like, maybe they do it an entirely different way than John Krasinski's family. Maybe they don't have, John Krasinski's family didn't have the happiest of endings, but maybe they don't have a happy ending at all. And maybe everybody dies. And like, that's the twist that they add onto that. Like, oh, you're following these characters, you get to know them. They've been doing a really good job. One mess up kind of wipes them out. And then now you can look forward to a brand new movie that has a different take on it. I think that would be kind of interesting.
You know what? Very similar to like what they did with Cloverfield, right?
Yeah.
And I know like they kind of slapped the Cloverfield on both of the second and the third Cloverfield movies afterwards, but it was the same world from a different perspective, which is exactly how you should handle something like A Quiet Place. What happens in a city setting when the Angels of Death happens? What happens to, someone who's on a boat? I don't know.
In a submarine.
Spitballing here. On a submarine, boom! Like, you take the same setup and give it a different perspective. You could have a really neat franchise world without this dumb family. I'm about to spoil the ending of A Quiet Place. This is probably well beyond spoiler territory, but heads up. Pun intended, how tone deaf was that ending? After the death of the father, after they discover the weakness of the aliens, the mom cocks a shotgun and looks directly in camera going, fuck yeah. Fuck that. Like, after, like, the entire movie is all about, like, oh, depressing, slow life, a father understanding his daughter who might be responsible for his other son's death. A new birth comes in, the mom just cocking a shotgun. What a heel turn. Fuck.
So, Jack, I mean, the movie you're describing, it sounds like a good movie, a tasteful movie, a respectful movie. Does it sound like a movie that has both a sequel and spin-off in post-production or in production right now? I don't think so. You're underrating the power of Emily Blunt cocking a shotgun. It's at least a 0 on your grosses.
Yeah, you're right. But in any case, I think Casey has the exact right idea here, where you can take this world and make as many sequels as you want as long as it's from a new perspective. But we already know that the Quiet Place 2 is Emily Blunt and the family, hearing aid boogaloo.
And Cillian Murphy. Don't forget Cillian Murphy.
Is he?
It just seems like the wrong way to go, but it'll probably make more money than the first because that's what these horror sequels do. People are like, oh, I really like that first one, I want to see another movie like that. They go to watch it and they're like, you know what, that wasn't that good.
Right. Yeah. And why not, like, for me, the part I never understand is why not invest in 10 more super low budget, high premise horror movies and gamble on one of them hitting it big? Why go with the sure thing that now is going to cost you a lot more money when maybe, diminishing returns?
Yeah.
Why not invest in more weird stuff?
Yeah, because there's no room in the marketplace for that. That's the problem. Because, like, again, like, the thing, I mentioned it there, it's the blessing and the curse of A Quiet Place, is that it is a design for a theatrical experience. I think it's notable that Paramount have not sold it to Netflix, much like they sold on, say, the Lovebirds to Netflix, for example. I think they sold one of their Oscar contenders, I can't remember which one it was, to Netflix as well. And it's they sold the trial.
Hillbilly Elegy?
No, it wasn't. Hillbilly Elegy happened all on its own, and we'll talk about that when it's time to talk about that. No, it was the Trial of the Chicago 7 is what they sold to Netflix.
Okay.
I just watched that too. I like that a lot.
It's very old-fashioned sort of 90s style prestige drama, which is what I'm here for. It's like, I remember when movies used to be like this, and I'm happy. But what I would say is, like, the thing with The Quiet Place is Paramount haven't sold A Quiet Place 2 on, and obviously that's because The Quiet Place is very important to Paramount right now, but it's also because it's a movie that arguably only works in cinemas. Like, I can't imagine, like, I suspect that Jack might have a slightly different impression of A Quiet Place had he watched it in a room full of people reacting to it as intensely as I had.
I mean, I also watched it with just my girlfriend, so I didn't get the theater experience for that either. But I mean, I still enjoyed it. But like I said, like, I would probably never go to a theater to watch a horror movie because I don't really like horror movies. So that's just going to be a rare occurrence in itself.
No, and I think that's a fair criticism of my criticism. And I do and I mean, I am a person who really enjoys the theater going experience for just that reason. Like, being part of a collective gasp or a collective quiet can be very powerful. So you might be right.
But my point is more that, like, that's the issue with the Quiet Place too, is that, like, if you're going to do it, it needs to be a theatrical release, and that means it needs to have the budget of a theatrical release, which means that it needs to be big, it needs to be a blockbuster, because everything released in cinemas now needs to be a blockbuster. It needs to be $100 million film in order to possibly compete on opening weekend, because it needs to earn all of its money back in opening weekend, because next opening weekend you've got another $100 million film, which has also got to earn its budget back in its opening weekend, and the cycle continues. Like, I think, like, I agree entirely. Like, my strategy, like, God forbid Disney call me up and they say, Darren, we've been having some thoughts lately about a business model and we want to take some chances. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you called, Disney, because I have some great ideas. One of those big ideas would be like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to cut half of the over $100 million movies. You get to keep half of them, and we hopefully will pick the good ones. I hope you'll pick the good ones, but I'm going to leave that up to you, whichever half you want. And then take the money that you put in the other half and make, like, maybe not 10 times as many smaller budget movies from upcoming directors, but, somewhere in that region. And statistically, one of them will hit enough that you can then grow a massive franchise off that if you feel the need to later on, And
that'd be just great.
And even if only one of them hits, the odds are a couple more will be good and nobody will go see them, but critics will like them and I'll like them and everybody who works on them will be very proud of them. So let's do that as well. That will be my crazy business model, but it won't happen because there's no way that you crunch the numbers and that makes sense. Yeah, there's no way that
that plan requires the execs to like movies. Like they have to care about making good movies.
They stopped caring about movies a long time ago. Absolutely.
I think they care about movies. They just care about money a lot more, and their job security as well, and shareholder calls, crucially. Which is like, again, with Disney. The thing you'll notice about Disney is they always have like big internet news when they're about to do a shareholders call with some bad news on it, because it's like, yeah, the real important stuff is we want to keep our jobs after this call. So yeah, no, I kind of see that. Fun fact in terms of like just something I read this week in terms of like that movie executives who have no idea how to make movies. The ending of Seven, and again, we'll put a little spoiler tag down the bottom here in case you haven't seen Seven. You should all see Seven. For its 25th anniversary, they were talking about like the ending that they had there. And the ending very famously features one of the characters' heads in a box. And it's a shocking ending. It's a brutal ending. It's a depressing ending. Apparently, when they took the script to executives kind of sat down and they read it and they stroked their chin and they said, we like the script, but we think the ending needs a little bit of work. Here's what we pitch. So they take him out to the desert. The package arrives. It's a box. They open the box. Inside the box, there's a television. And on the television, his wife's being held hostage. And they have to race against time to solve the case and rescue her, giving us a happy ending, and the credits roll, and everybody's delighted. And it's like, oh, you guys don't... you're supposed to understand how movies work. That's your job. That's your one job.
They don't. That's like the wonderful thing for anyone who, like pays attention to movie news. No one knows what they're doing. They're just making decisions, and sometimes they work. That's it. Like that's the lesson for life. No one actually knows what they're doing. We're just making it up as we go.
No one knows what'll actually hit big or not. Like they all like. Why are all of the executive strategies based on what has already happened?
Yeah.
Like everything is based on the past. Like they're absolutely risk averse. It's a problem.
Oh, it is. But I mean, on the other hand, it's also keeping them in their jobs because job security. Because it's like nobody wants to be the guy who's like, I took a massive punt and what happened? It didn't work out. We lost several $100 million. It's like, well, don't worry, Bob. You can try again next week. It's like, no, everybody wants to be like, well, okay, our growth numbers are maybe a little underperforming. We only made like $100 million on the last Star Wars film as opposed to $300 million, you know?
It is much safer.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But I think we can all just agree that, a Quiet Place 2, a Quiet Place 3.
Watch Jeff Nichols' movie. So watch Midnight Special, watch Take Shelter, watch Mud, and maybe just the reconnaissance in general. Familiarize yourself with that rich vein of American cinematic history.
Would True Detective be part of the reconnaissance?
Yes, it would.
Ooh,
You know what? Yep, I can get behind that. That makes sense.
Yeah, we can all be with you there. All right. Well, you know what? I think that's great. So the happy ending we can pin onto this segment is at least a director who is very good is getting paid very well. We hope.
Like, do we actually know?
We don't know that. For all we know, he's working for, I don't know, stock dividends or something. So yeah.
Oh, gee. Well, maybe. Oh, wait, Paramount. Never mind. All right. Well, then we will move on to the final segment, The Mandalorian. I guess heads up for everyone. I'll just say this right off of the bat. We will be discussing the first 3 episodes of The Mandalorian. All spoilers. So if you haven't seen them yet, tune out now. Thanks for watching and or listening, because we're going to talk about all the episodes that are available to us at the moment. There it was. Now all spoiler talk. So I can't believe Yaddle came back.
Palpatine
I have a
again was a
confession to
bold
make.
call.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not because I kind of fell asleep in the middle of the 3rd episode.
That's fair.
And
Okay.
I did not have time to catch up on that. So 1 and 2 down, 3rd one's hate.
For anyone who doesn't know, Yaddle is the female Yoda that appears briefly in the Star Wars prequels as part of the Jedi Council. The only canonical female of the Yoda species is Yaddle. Now you know that. I know that, so now you do. She does not appear in episode 3, by the way.
I'm quite happy to hand this one over to Jack and KC on this one because I'm doing the reviews on the kind of YouTube channel, so I'm quite happy to sit back and let you guys kind of steer the conversation. That's
right. Yeah, that's
so
right.
How are you guys reacting?
Here on the Escapist Movies YouTube channel, you can watch all of Darren's full reviews of all the episodes, which are fantastic. This is the first 3 episodes are exactly what I worried about with The Mandalorian. They are all perfectly adequate and seem to have missed what made season 1 so enjoyable, namely characters. We 3 episodes in, there is not one interesting character that, or except maybe the sheriff, maybe Timothy Oliphant. The sheriff is fine, but it's missing all of the characters that made the first season interesting. I feel like they are very focused on the plot, on how he gets to where he goes next, and that has become the focus of season 2 so far for me.
No, I think that tracks. And to qualify, I personally am not the biggest Star Wars fan. Like, I enjoy the series. I think they're fine. Like, the love and adoration that millions and millions of people have for Star Wars is just not in my wheelhouse. Sorry. But I like them. You know, I like them. So I have been keeping up. I agree with you. Like, there aren't interesting characters kind of showing up and having tit for tat situations with Mando. And I think what they're trying to do, and it might be to its detriment, is they're kind of overusing the love that came about from the Baby Yoda hype. Like, Baby Yoda wasn't featured so heavily in the first season as it seems like it's being featured from the first couple episodes. You know what I mean? Like, Baby Yoda is in it a bunch, and Baby Yoda to the point where he's getting annoying. And I know he's called the Child. I know someone's going to be in the chat coming at me. He's called the Child. I like Baby Yoda better.
His name is Baby Yoda. That's what we all call him.
We have 3 comments already on the podcast now.
But what I'm getting at is, like, he's, I think, mostly by himself in the first episode. And, like, I'm hazing on it because, like, it was fine, like Jack said.
It was fine, yeah.
And then the second one, you know, it's called The Passenger, and the passenger doesn't speak for a lot of the movie. So it's like, you really don't care or form any kind of connection with that character. And also, it's kind of an uninteresting Star Wars. It's just like an anthropomorphic frog woman.
Right.
It's like, that's, like, I didn't know Star Wars had creatures like this. But like Baby Yoda's eating her babies and that's supposed to be funny.
Joke,
like,
yeah.
I did. You know what? I like that. I liked it. I thought it was funny.
Like, it's like I'm like, this baby's annoying. Like, sit down. Like, listen to your father. Like, so I mean, I'm just being distracted by all of like the shenanigans and trying to make Baby Yoda like more personable and cute and whatnot. And I think it is kind of getting away from the more westerny, samurai-ish type style that I liked a lot in the first season.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and we're getting to a point now in episode 3. I don't know if you got to this point, Casey, but like, I do wonder if, like, because like I like Star Wars. I guess I would consider myself a fan. I never read the novels.
You identified the female Yoda, Jack. You are a fan. Like,
I'm a fan.
To be fair, I know that too, but it's because I just soak up all this internet nerd stuff.
Right, exactly. Like, you know, I couldn't tell you, like, you know, some people can name all the spaceships. I can't do that sort of thing.
I can name some of the spaceships.
Like, I do wonder if this is how other people feel like when they watch like a Marvel movie, because like I know a lot about the Marvel characters, and like in episode 3 we get to a point where one of the Mandalorian ladies goes, "Hey, go find I know someone you can talk to. Go find," and she looks directly into camera, "Ahsoka." And she goes,
"Oh, that's a big deal."
And then she goes, "Tell her Bo-Katan sent you." And then like there's that little pause, and like I don't know who either of those people are. And so I was like, what's happening? Is that a big thing? And like I looked it up later, and so now I know who both Bo-Katan and Ahsoka are. I did not know that.
see that I didn't realize was in that episode, and I would have gotten excited for that. And that's because like more so than like the Star Wars universe and whatnot, and movies in general, I'm kind of a cartoon guy.
Okay.
And the Star Wars Clone Wars series, the CG series, I personally think is the best Star Wars thing that exists.
And it's very popular. You're not alone in that.
It is
very,
really
very
good.
popular.
It is genuinely good.
Yeah.
And Ahsoka Tano is the character she's my favorite character in that series. Like, it's mostly following Obi-Wan and Anakin and whatnot, but she's in it. She's Anakin's Padawan. And by the end of that, she's a very important character. So for her to now, now that you're saying, I remember there were all these leaks on the news about Rosario Dawson, I think, maybe playing her.
Yes,
So I didn't know this, but I would have forgotten at that point and then saw it and been excited again. So that I think is actually good. And that I think might turn it around, because that's a very strong character. And if she's portrayed well, that could be a good, bouncing off point for The Mandalorian, maybe.
Maybe to me, much like we were talking about with A Quiet Place, The Mandalorian, what made it so strong is it's the world we know, but off in its own corner. And what they're doing now, and they make a lot of references in the first season to Star Wars. It's all the Star Wars, but they're still doing their own thing. It exists in its own pocket. But now they're starting to pull their way to
they literally replay the climax of Return of the Jedi in the first episode in case you haven't had enough Death Stars in your Star Wars content. It's we got a CGI 3D model of the Death Star blowing up. In case you didn't catch that the first time we did it, the second time we did it, the third time we did it, and the time we used computer-generated models of it in the prequels as well. I know you guys have been saying we don't have enough Death Stars in Star Wars. Well, we fixed that for you in this season premiere. Sorry, I feel the same way that I think Jack does here, where it feels like part of the issue for me with the season so far is that it feels like a Star Wars content delivery mechanism more than a story. Where it feels like, let's just inject this, canon property directly into your veins, because and I think it's interesting that Jack mentions the characters in the first season, because you do have these characters who are interesting. So I really liked seeing Werner Herzog's client in the first season, because he's such an odd fit for Star Wars. It's such a wonderfully strange choice. Nick Nolte as this kind of grumpy moisture farmer dude who just lets you know this is how it is, which is great. That sort of stuff I really enjoyed.
The assassin droid, the
Waititi.
Wrestler lady who has the big gun, they're fun characters that make the world deeper.
That's it exactly. And my problem with, and again, I'll talk about some of the stuff I like about the second season in a moment, because I'm not entirely harsh or cynical or cold. I don't hate it. I don't think it's terrible or anything like that. But my big problem with the second season so far is that instead of having those characters, it has these bits of continuity. So you have the opening episode. And the opening episode, the Jawas have literally built a fucking shrine to Boba Fett. There's a little, they built a little sort of totem, kind of let's worship this cargo cult armor that we found. And the episode then literally has the Mandalorian swallowed by a beast living in a hole in the middle of the desert and blowing his way out of it, in case you didn't get that this is actually all about Boba Fett. And then at the end of the episode, you have a shot of what might be an old retired stormtrooper, but is probably Boba Fett turning to the camera and the music rising and going, see? Here's your continuity hit. And it's look, I'm not a huge Boba Fett fan, but if you're gonna bring in Boba Fett, do it properly, make him a character. I would love for Boba Fett to be the sassy assassin droid from the first season, or for Boba Fett to be the grumpy moisture farmer from the first season. All right, if you're gonna do that,
that would work.
Yeah.
If Boba Fett came back and is just done with the Mandalore life, done with the bounty hunter life, and it's just fuck, man, I'm just here. I'm just living now. I got a job down at the hotel. I'm changing sheets. This is my life now. I'm not getting back in the game. You could make him a retired hitman. I'm not coming back in, man.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is kill Boba Fett's womp rat to make him come back and have him John Wick his way across the galaxy.
People keep asking me if I'm back. I'm guessing, I'm back. But no, I mean...
I would love that, because that would be more than what we got, which was him looking to the camera going, huh?
Look, right here.
This is what you wanted.
And again, the same thing with Bo-Katan, who's I also watched the Clone Wars and also really like the Clone Wars, and I would argue that the Mandalore stuff in the Clone Wars is, and again, slightly lukewarm take from Darren here, give or take the unnecessary fan service continuity resurrection of Darth Maul, I would argue that the Mandalorian stuff in the Clone Wars is some of the best stuff in the Clone Wars. So, I should be theoretically very excited to see that stuff coming into the show. But when it shows up, it's quite literally Katie Sackhoff, who is an actor who I love, playing Bo-Katan, who is a character who is, in previous iterations and conceptually on paper, interesting. But her primary function here is to be well, I'm here for an episode. guess you better feck off and get to the next bit of continuity you gotta meet. It's like there's no real like sense of who she is as a person, what she represents, what her agency is, like what she's doing, what makes her different from any of the other two guys either side of her. Like what is it like? Why is sell me on why she's a good character? I know she's a good character because I've seen her be a good character, but like
no, but that's
it. Yeah.
Here she was an info dump. She was not a character. She's like, oh, I'm here to tell you that the Mandalore culture that you grew up in was a cult. I'm part of this Mandalore culture. I'm trying to become the Mandalore, who is the ruler of Mandalore. Yes, it is confusing because it's the same name. I'm looking for the dark saber. You remember that thing from season 1? Yeah, and like, she was ticking off boxes, not being a character. Yeah.
And again, like even Moff Gideon, for example, here is very much like, oh look, he's back, so it's important. You know, this episode is important because we got the special guest star from the series finale, the Emmy-nominated Giancarlo Esposito, and so you know that there are stakes. Like that's the thing. Like, so a lot of people have been complaining about the side questy nature of the episodes at this point, in particular, say the second episode where they land on the ice planet and it's just an adventure with ice spiders. And I actually don't have a huge problem with that because that's what Star Wars largely has always been. It's based on these old Republic serials and they're very episodic adventures, and nominally there's this idea of progression and getting towards some goal towards the end, which you have to in a movie because it's 2 hours long, but on like a long form serial you don't really have to. You can keep spinning wheels as long as you've got good ideas and they're interesting. And again, it's notable that they did this in the first season. I mean, when we talked about it, I joked about how, you know, they like the Prison Break episode in the first season, the Seven Samurai episode in the first season, the episode with the fecking rhino, like that sort of stuff. Like those are episodes that are completely separate to the plot. They're all episodic adventures, but they work fine because we're invested in the characters. And like, I don't mind that. Like the story so far have been very episodic. It's like, you know, Jaws, but in the desert with sand with Timothy Olyphant, and I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll watch that. Give me that.
You know, it's apparently high budget, low rent Tremors, which is like fine.
Which is Jaws in the desert basically, or like Ice Planet, which is like Aliens but with CGI ice spice. Like, yeah, sure, I'll watch that. The problem is that like when you get to like episode 3, and episode 3 is just like pirates in an adventure with jetpacks basically, because it's very much like, oh, we're doing a maritime episode and also it's about piracy, but piracy in the skies because it's Star Wars. And it's like, that's fine. That's fine. Do that. I will happily watch that adventure. But the show then tries to tell me that it's important because it gets you closer to continuity. It's that thing, like, instead of having characters, it's continuity. Instead of having plot, it's continuity. Like, so people were angry last week that there was an adventure involving, like, spiders that didn't do anything to advance the plot. Like, this week, it's exactly the same thing, except it's pirates. But it just so happens that we have, like, important characters there, like Katie Sackhoff or Giancarlo Esposito. So this episodic adventure matters, even though it doesn't really matter any more or any less than any other one.
I think what that is that the general public not understanding what it is they don't like about episode 2, which, like you said, episode 2 is fine. It's big ice spiders. It's a fun little adventure. And if you replaced Mute Frog Lady with a character who was really fun and interesting, that episode would have been gangbusters.
Nick Nolte's Moisture Farmer. Come on.
Like, replace that lady with like bitchy retired
Assassin Boba Fett.
Assassin Boba Fett, thank you. I forgot Boba Fett's name for a moment because Star Wars is dumb.
Like Boba Fett is like carrying some delivery home from like his Fruit Expo business. It's like he's got to get them to Moncala before the pass date sells, and it's like, oh,
and he overwrites if you go into hyperspace.
So exactly.
And he's just being like a total diva bitch about like, oh, this is how you're gonna fly your plane. I mean, I used to fly mine better, whatever. Like that would have been.
And the Mando's like, you know, I could use some help here with these spiders, and Jack Packard's like, I don't do that shit anymore. That's what I'm paying you for. And it's like, tell me that doesn't make the episode much better.
Of course it does.
Well, I mean, it would probably make the episode much better. But just like how Jack said, I don't know who Ahsoka Tano is, and that did nothing for me. And I had like almost the exact opposite reaction. I think that's what Disney is kind of harping on, is like that fervent fan base who has watched all the other things. Yeah. That's enough for them to just hear the name Bo-Katan and know what that means, all the backstory that is involved with that. They don't need that expressed in this show because they've already seen it elsewhere. So in the sense, it's like, it's kind of like Disney saying like, this is an easy way to get like a what is it, dopamine
Yeah.
hit in watching brain. So we'll just do that and we'll keep it moving.
What's actually worth noting there is I think well, Casey's entirely right there, and also the fact that this is on Disney Plus in particular, and Disney Plus is a subscription service, so you want people to continue watching Disney Plus even if you're not releasing new Star Wars content in it. So what's a great way to do that? It's to do exactly what you did to Jack, which is to say, they mentioned the name Ahsoka Katana. That means that it's important, or Bo-Katan. They're important. That means I have to go back and watch all of the Clone Wars. And where is the Clone Wars available? How can I watch? I have a Disney Plus subscription. I can watch that right now, and I can watch it when The Mandalorian's not on the air, when they're not releasing new episodes.
It's so crazy. They've just added value to the thing I'm already paying for.
Yeah.
How wonderful.
Brilliant. It's as brilliant as it is insidious.
No, like I don't doubt like that's a large part of like the universe building that they're doing, because like again, you know, we franchise and continuity, and I'm a big nerd. I love this sort of stuff as well, but it's also very much about like getting buy-in and integration. Like you'll notice that like a large part of selling streaming services is franchises and properties, where it's like, well, look, maybe CBS All Access won't have new Star Trek content every week of the year, but you know what it does have? Every single one of the 700 episodes of Star Trek beforehand, so you can just binge them when you're not watching new Star Trek content. And again, I get the sense with Star Wars that's what they're doing. That's very much what they're selling. It's like, well, you know, you might not know who Bo-Katan is now, Jack, but next year when season 3 rolls around and she's a much more important character, you'll be glad that you spent $8 a month to catch up on that.
I
mean, you are a fan, aren't you? Can you really call yourself a fan if you don't know Bo-Katan?
Are you a true
Apparently I could. I used to be able to.
I love that, by the way, Casey. It's like you're no fan if you don't know Bo-Katan.
That's the propaganda posting. Gosh darn it. No, I mean you're obviously you're very correct. I think the other thing that's bothering me is Mando's current mission, which is Mando's current mission, is to get rid of Baby Yoda, to give Baby Yoda to the Jedi people. And I'm gonna assume that us three here and anyone listening is smart enough to know that Baby Yoda ain't going anywhere. That's the meal ticket right now for the Mandalorian. And so, like, there's that part of Jack that knows the business too well that can't turn off that part of his brain to be like, I can't enjoy the story because right now Mando's like, gotta get rid of this kid. It's like, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah. It's like that formula works when you're doing a road movie that's like 2 hours long, and it's like the adult stuck with the kid that they're going to give up at the end, and you know they're not going to, because you're only going to spend 2 hours of them going, well, I really haven't grown attached to you, but I'm slowly growing attached to you, and we're bonding. When you stretch that over, I think 16 hours by the time that presumably this is going to reach a head in the season finale, if it reaches a head in this season finale, it's like, yeah, we were there 8 episodes ago.
Yeah, I would argue he was there pretty early in the first season, right? Like, yeah, you never really got the sense that he was unhappy that the child was around him. Like, he saved his life and was literally like, oh, like, he's cool with me. Yeah. Like, we have a history. Like,
guess I'll just go back to killing things. What I will say, though, is I love the idea that, like, Jack... part of my galaxy brain is like, what if this is a bluff? What if they're playing our expectations? And somewhere deep in the headquarters of Disney, the guy who was like, Yoda, but he's a baby, has been working all night and come up with Chewbacca, but he's a baby. And that's your season 3 right there. But no, I come on, tell me you wouldn't watch that.
First of all, they tried that already with Ewoks with mixed results.
What I will say, actually, I feel like we've been maybe a bit harsh in the second season. I'm not like I had a strong reaction against it. It's not like I hate it. It's not like I think it's terrible or anything like that.
Right.
I think like its production value is once again fantastic. I like that Favreau is like, there's a sense of watching the first 2 episodes, there was a really odd sense that Favreau was slightly movie nerding out, where it was like, what am I gonna do? I'm making a Star Wars show, so I'm gonna put in a reference to, I'm gonna basically do Jaws, but in the desert for my Steven Spielberg fix. And then you get to the second one, it's like, well, I've done Jaws, I'm making a Star Wars show, guess I better do Aliens. And it's like, okay, fine. That sort of stuff I'm kind of there for. I'm like, Favreau having reached the end of things he thinks he can do with The Mandalorian, being like, okay, well, what am I gonna bring in this week? It's like, what have I been watching this week? I'm waiting for the Mando does Tootsie episode or something like that. You know, if we're getting like going proper old fashioned. But I mean,
the claymation Christmas special.
Yeah, exactly.
But you say that as if like next week we don't have the Lego Star Wars holiday special, which is quite literally being packaged and sold to us as the past is the best present, in case you don't get the subtext that we're sending you here.
Buy our things. Buy it now. It's a
nostalgia.
present. We have all these Lego things. Here's a calendar. You can have a new Lego thing every day. Here's a Star Wars ship. Go.
But not even that. It's like there is no future. Star Wars has no future. There is nothing beyond. Why would you want there to be something beyond? Why can't the present just be like the past? Why can't we just keep bringing the past in, man? Why can't we take Rey and drop her into the original trilogy? Why can't we take the characters from the animated shows that fans love and move them into live action instead of introducing, new characters? I mean, you know, again, I worry I'm sounding more negative about this than I am. It's still very well produced. The cast are still very charming. And, you know, I mean, the Yoda puppet is still adorable. And I mean, you know, Casey might be approaching kind of the limits of his kind of like tolerance for it. But I have to...
A child being adorable is not an excuse to act up. That's just how I feel. You can be as adorable as you want. I sit down when I tell you to sit down.
I love that this. I think have to sense this conversation is steering towards: is it appropriate to hit a baby Yoda? If the situation calls it, like
that's already happened. They already punched Baby Yoda,
right?
And fans hated him for it. But what I will say is that like almost every scene is made better by a Baby Yoda reaction shot. Like even when Baby Yoda's not around, even like when he drops Baby Yoda off in this episode to go on and have crazy jetpack adventures, I kind of want to have random Baby Yoda reaction shots just cut into the mix anyway, because they kind of do. Sure. They almost make things kind of better. And again, like it is that kind of sweet spot of like knowing what your audience is there for. And I'm a little bit sad that what they're there for seems to be nostalgia for other Star Wars stuff rather than let's have fun adventures. But like you know, they are there also for Baby Yoda reaction shots and Baby Yoda being cute. And again, it's notable that, and it's not really a controversy, and I'm not saying it's a controversy, and I'm dreading bringing this up, but things like, say, grossly overestimating how cute Baby Yoda is when he eats, like, the egg of a dying species repeatedly. Like, when he gobbles up...
Like, for me, that was upsetting. I was
like, I love that. I thought that was hilarious.
This child is misbehaving.
Yeah. He doesn't know any better. He's just a hungry little boy. It's great.
Let me just kill go an extinct species.
Yeah,
he doesn't know that. He's a baby.
Mando packs some snacks. Like, I mean, come on.
Right, I was like, what else is he eating? That was a question that I did have.
That's
like,
the thing.
Mando don't feed you?
It's like, how much storage space does that ship have? And you don't have, like, a little pack of crisps when he needs them? It's like...
Mando is a new parent, and, you know, as the only other, as a parent here, your first kid, you aren't necessarily prepared. Like, by the time they get older, and by the time you have your second kid, you got Cheerios in every pocket, just in case. But your first kid, yeah, that's fair.
Sometimes they go hungry. Okay.
You're hungry. I just learned. So Mando learned a lesson. Later in the season, we should see a situation in which Baby Yoda gets hungry and Mando pulls something out of his pocket.
I will hold you to that. If I see that, I'm gonna say Jack was right.
Yeah.
Because he's learning as a parent. Like, I got a little barf snack for you or whatever it is. Yeah.
Sandwich. It's like, I always make a sandwich when I go out. It's like, fine, we can share this one. Yeah.
Gotta have space Cheerios.
I can't eat it anyway with this mask on. Was it when he goes to the bar in Moncala and they're like, everyone has to order food? Part of me was waiting for him to go, can I have a straw, please?
Right. Well, first of all, right.
Something that actually just came to mind though is the one of the bigger differences I think between season 1 and season 2 is like what other Star Wars properties are kind of out and about right now. Like it seems like right now the whole weight of Star Wars is kind of resting on the Mandalorian, so they do kind of have to inject it with everything else maybe other Star Wars fans like.
And make it important. Make it weighty. Yeah.
Wasn't the most recent movie was still on the horizon during season 1, right? Or did
it release? It released. No, it released in the middle of it, I think, as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So they could be like, this is big Star Wars, this is little Star Wars, and now there's just little Star Wars, so they want to make it feel maybe bigger.
Yeah.
They want to ruin it just like they did with big Star Wars. Perfect. Perfect. You did it. You're killing everything slowly, Star Wars. Way to go.
Wow. Okay.
Jazz hands for the execs.
Yeah. I feel like I need to qualify my own complaints, because I feel like I've done a lot of complaining on this podcast. I'm not quite at the "you're killing Star Wars" phase yet, to be clear. I'm just in the maybe tone it back a bit phase.
To be perfectly fair here, I think season 2 so far has been just about adequate, which is, of course, I know
fine. It's fine.
Damnation by faint praise. But what I will say in regards to what we just said is I don't believe they are killing Star Wars. I believe they have already killed Star Wars. They did that a long time ago, and every once in a while we'll get like a death throw, like we'll get they call it a death rattle, right? After you die, sometimes your muscles spasm. So like, we got a muscle spasm for The Last Jedi. We got a muscle spasm for season 1, and now it's continuing to be dead.
Is there a chance that it can come back, in your opinion, then, as probably the biggest Star Wars fan here?
The burden of being a Star Wars fan.
Because like almost nothing will be good enough for that kind of classic Star Wars fan. Is like they want that recreation of what they felt when they first got introduced to that universe, and like that's a hard bar to hit.
And I feel like, and we talked about this a couple podcasts ago, where like I felt like season 1 of The Mandalorian was a lot of that. It was the Star Wars I liked. It was fun adventures. It was cool ships. It was robots. It was pew pew lasers, without any of the baggage of the Skywalker clan. And what I see.
Oh, cookie.
Excuse you. If you're gonna do that, you have to come on camera and earn your money. What I'm seeing, what the problem with Star Wars is always their need to feel like they need to pull other Star Wars into the Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we will ever be free of the nostalgia grabbing until the series is truly dead and not making money anymore. Then they can do whatever they want. And so, no, it will never happen. It's dead. It will, every time they hit on something, or like the first season of Mandalorian, oh, we were doing our own thing, we were just having fun in the universe. Nope, we gotta pull it in with the rest of the crap now.
You're like, oh, now that you're a success, come join the rest of this.
Yeah, it's exactly what we mentioned with The Quiet Place, where it's like The Quiet Place succeeded because it was an unscripted, unplanned, low budget movie that just happened to find a massive audience. And then, The Mandalorian isn't quite that, because they knew exactly what it was, and it was designed to launch Disney Plus. But it was, as you pointed out, small Star Wars. Now, not only is Big Star Wars getting significantly retooled and possibly not happening on screen for a very, very, very long time. But, even if that wasn't the case and it was, Big Star Wars by default, it's popular Star Wars. It's the Star Wars that absolutely everybody loved. And nobody loves absolutely all Star Wars. Like, again, like if you make Star Wars and absolutely everybody loves it, it's like hitting a perfect 300 game in bowling. It's so yeah, there is that gravity of kind of expectation. So you end up with situations like The Quiet Place 2, where it's like, do it again, but this time with a list of corporate demands that we'd like you to incorporate into it.
Now that you've succeeded on your own,
other franchises.
Yes, you've done a great job succeeding on your own. Now I'm going to tell you how to succeed more.
Now, do you mind if we hitch something up to you? And by hitch up, I mean support you and encourage you. Maybe a little weight. You're going to need a little bit of thrust, but don't worry, it'll be fine. You got a jetpack, right?
Yeah. No, and like I said, to me, everything it's adequate. It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
I kind of love that, like, Jack is the one true hardcore Star Wars fan on this podcast, and he's the one who's most bitterly disillusioned with this. Whereas myself and KC, who are like, we like bits of Star Wars and it's good fun and it's enjoyable space adventures.
Yeah, it's a good time.
It's a good time. And we're like, yeah, so The Mandalorian season 2 is also, it's a good time. It's fine. We're enjoying it. But Jack's like, no, Star Wars is dead. It's death rattle. The corpses void their bowels when they die? I feel like we were just one step away from the analogy reaching that level.
Well, no, that was The Last Skywalker, or The Rise of Skywalker. That was The Rise of Skywalker. It evacuated
that was
his
indeed
bowels.
a very bad movie.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like there's still life in that universe. Like, honestly, the most popular thing, at least for me, and I think for most people about Star Wars, is they're laser samurai, the Jedi. Right. Like, they're super cool. Like, they're very interesting when they don't focus so heavily on the religious side. When they're just running around as like samurai secret agents and whatnot. They're at their best.
Less space Mormons, more space ninjas.
Right, exactly. Let's see more of that stuff. I think that's really cool. And they're basically making that the end goal of the Mandalorian. Like, where, like, just you said, his goal is to get rid of Yoda, but to give him to who? Space wizards.
Space wizards.
Like, he's at the end of this, or the big draw for the people watching is eventually we get to the Jedi.
Right.
So,
but I mean, do we want to get to the Jedi? I mean, we got to the Jedi with the prequels, and I know that people have been like reevaluating the prequels recently, and it's weird because I was like, when the prequels came out, I was in the they're not as bad as everybody says camp, and now that everybody else is like reevaluating the prequels, I'm in the they're not as good as everybody says they are camp, which is quite a remarkable thing for it to happen in like the 20 years since that happened. But like we've done Star Wars with excess and surplus Jedi before, and it was maybe not what fans wanted. So what is the end game that we're building to here that's going to be different this time?
But I mean, what was the faults of that the Jedi in it though? I feel like there were a lot of things around the prequel series outside of just the Jedi stuff that really did bring it down. Because like that was probably the best parts of those movies, like the lightsaber fights, the
council meetings, the internal politics, the scheming, the
remember when they had all those meetings?
Remember when they went to the library?
Remember when they were like evaluating blood samples? Yeah, that was the exciting part of the prequel.
But that's not what I think of when I think Jedi stuff. You know what I mean?
No.
Right. Like they went way too far in the weeds with that, for sure. But like when you get a dude who shows up, takes his hood off, and he lights his laser sword.
Yeah. Oh,
boom! This is what I'm looking for in my Star Wars.
Like I agree with you. Like the problem, and we're all saying the same thing here, which is the problem is when they focus too much on the dogma. Like, the Jedi was a really cool concept in the original trilogy because why? Because we didn't know that much about it. When they started to explain the Jedi, that's when shit got fucked.
Like more so than even the Jedi. I feel like when they try to explain the Force, like that's where I absolutely tune out.
I was about to say, I think that like what Jack said there doesn't just apply to the Jedi, it applies to Star Wars in general, in that like I think one of the great things about Star Wars, like as somebody who likes the movies and loves the movies and actually loves quite a few of the movies, is like it's the little bits where they say things like I did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, and it's like I don't know what the Kessel Run is. I don't necessarily care what the Kessel Run is, but I can think for a moment about it and imagine what it might be, and it's great fun inside my head when I do that. Mm-hmm. It's less fun when Ron Howard shows up. He's like, "Well, gather round, children. I'm going to tell you the tale of the Kessel Run." And I'm like, my imagination is much better than Ron Howard's. I mean, I like Ron Howard a lot, but my imagination is, probably like more suited to my interests than Ron Howard's imagination, if we're being entirely honest. And like that's my feeling with a lot of Star Wars stuff, is that like once you over-explain anything, it becomes too much. And like we joked about Boba Fett earlier on. That's very much it. It's like Boba Fett as kind of mysterious, not really great bounty hunter, slightly sleazy guy who chats up the dancers at Jabba's palace and jetpacks into a wall is interesting. Like, he's an interesting character.
Sure.
Boba Fett is the coolest, sexiest bounty hunter who ever lived, who is also secretly the inspiration for all stormtroopers, who for some reason can't hit the broadside of a barn, and is also mythically alive on, like, Tatooine after the events of Return of the Jedi. That's less interesting than the first thing that I said.
Yeah, it's too much.
That's exactly, and like, it's exactly what you mentioned with the Jedi, the same with the Force, and all that sort of stuff. Like, I feel like if you ideally, and again, this is the thing, I think Jack and I have talked about this before, like, for me, you need to push Star Wars outwards, because once you stop going outwards, you start explaining the stuff that you've already talked about. And when you start explaining the stuff that you've already talked about, you very quickly end up in the weeds, as KC called it. So you need to keep going outwards and doing new and weird things and showing me new monsters, showing me new planets, giving me new images, giving me new kind of cultures with new ways of life that don't make sense if I think about them too much. But I'm not gonna, because there's another cool thing coming up.
Right, because now we're over here. Don't look over here anymore.
Like,
Right.
I mean, and that sounds like I'm picking on it or kind of like making fun of it. I'm not. I love that. Like, that's fun. Like, and again, that's what the expanded universe should be for. The expanded universe should be for, well, I've thought far too much about this thing. Please buy my 800-page book explaining this thing in immense detail and contradicting what everybody else thinks about this thing. That's what tie-ins are for. That's what like nerd like kind of like fringe, kind of like minutiae is for. The main Star Wars stuff should be like more space wizards, but different types of space wizards, but jetpacks, but ice worlds. No, we've done ice worlds. Water worlds then. Water worlds it is. What about a world that's made entirely of clouds and cocaine? Yeah, let's do that. Like that. Like just go. Like that's.
Where's my cape?
Yeah.
Where's my cape?
Yeah. It's like, why are you wearing the same costume that Han wore earlier in the film? I don't know. Let's not dwell on it. Let's just go.
Are you insinuating that Cloud City was a front for a cocaine deal?
We're just saying it is Party City there. That's all.
Sorry, that was a reference to Jack's discussion about what powered Bespin.
Yeah.
It was the 80s. It was the 80s.
No, exactly. Like, and to look at a contrasting side of this is like KC was mentioning, the Clone Wars animated series you really enjoy. Now that entire thing was based off of a throwaway line in the first movie. I fought with your father in the Clone Wars. Boom. That's the only thought they put into the Clone Wars. We don't know what it is. We don't care what it is. Clone Wars. That's a neat idea. They have expanded that into kind of an interesting thing, though. I will say that the clone troopers are super dumb. That's a dumb
But they're
concept.
all Boba Fett, Jack. They're all Boba Fett.
No, they're all Jango Fett.
Right, they're all Jango Fett.
Boba Fett is also Jango Fett. Don't make me have to get the blackboard out and do an equals to equation thing. The left side of the equation equals the right side of the equation, Jack.
To counter Jack's point, though, the clone stuff in the Clone Wars series is probably the best stuff in it. Honestly, like they get a level of depth and arcs and whatnot, and touch on some really interesting like philosophical questions about like the nature of humanity and like war and stuff. Yeah. So I think that's actually really cool that they went that deep. Yeah. In that regard, but maybe they didn't have to be.
No.
Well, then it's
Jango Fett.
it's a counterbalance. So that's an example of them like reaching into the weeds and pulling out some interesting stuff to mine from this throwaway line. But then the other side of the coin is the Kessel Run, where like, oh, that's a throwaway line. Let's make a whole movie about the Kessel Run, which sucked.
I thought it was adequate. It was a Ron Howard movie. It like was baseline competent, which is remarkable.
I liked Solo.
Okay.
Fuck.
Sorry, I apologize. I liked it.
It just completely invalidates his entire character from the original movies. But that's fine. It's fine.
Have you
was
seen
always
Return
a good guy.
of the Jedi? Have you seen Return of the Jedi?
He was always a good guy. It's fine. He wasn't a scoundrel at all.
I mean, but isn't that what most? I mean, honestly, I feel like his character. The whole point was he was never as bad as he was made out to be. You know,
he just pretended
so if you
he
go
was.
back into his past and you're hanging out with him when he's younger, like he's still a decent guy.
Well, he's just pretending. Yeah, that's it exactly. He's
right.
Like Han has always been like pretending to be cool and pretending not to care and pretending to be detached. Like think about the start of The Empire Strikes Back, where like he's just hanging round Hoth, even though
that's after.
And like Han is always.
That's after his character arc. I don't want like we're gonna start talking about Star Wars.
Yeah.
His character arc is he's a scoundrel in A New Hope, right?
Yeah.
He's a scoundrel dickhead. He owes money to the mob. He's doing this one run, and through that movie, he learns about the power of the Force from Luke. A little bit of that rubs off him. A little hope returns to him, and that's the character arc. So yeah, after A New Hope, he's a decent guy. He's a good guy. A little rough around the edges, but A New Hope was the character arc, and Solo invalidates all of that.
But I mean, like, I would argue that, like, sorry, we're getting really into the weeds here. I like that we're in the weeds.
Yes,
now.
we are.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
absolutely.
It's fine.
But like,
It's okay. We're talking about Star
but
Wars.
like the Empire, like the thing with The Empire Strikes Back is like The Empire Strikes Back is him doing that. Like, it's him pretending to be a jackass who doesn't care about anybody, which is exactly what he did in the original Star Wars. Like, I like Luke. I have a huge soft spot for Luke, but I don't believe that spending 3 days with Luke Skywalker is enough to completely reverse your entire worldview. In fact, I feel he's a little bit like kind of KC sees Baby Yoda, where it's like at a certain point you just want to slap Luke and say, "Jesus, cop yourself on, behave yourself, young man."
The Skywalkers are well known for their whining.
They really. No, I know, and I love Luke. Like, I'm not. This is not a criticism of Luke as a character, but like I feel like again you have that kind of thing where Han, I always believed, had that heart of gold. He just is, and to be clear about this, Casey's right. He's terrible at it, but he always pretends to cover it up. And like that's the thing. Like the thing that I adore about The Empire Strikes Back is he's just hanging around Hoth, going, I should really leave, and you get the sense that he's been saying, I should really leave for like 3 months now, but just won't.
Yep.
Like, he's like, give me a reason to stay. If you give me a reason to stay, I'll stay. And just come up with some excuse for me to stay. And Leia's like, fuck no. And he's like, well, I'll do it again tomorrow then. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll talk about leaving. It's like, yeah. And like,
right, yeah. He's a lot more dorky than he comes off at first.
Yeah.
And like that's the thing he's been trying to hide from the beginning. And like I kind of love that. Han is not super suave. He's not super cool.
Yeah.
He is a scoundrel because that's kind of the life he's leading. Like he has to deal with these other actually bad people. But he's a good guy, which is why he even agreed to help, these rebels in the first place, And like
and he
they
doesn't deal
unearth
very
that
well
about
with
him
these
because they're
bad
also
guys.
good
Yeah.
people.
It is what it is, I suppose.
Sorry.
I don't want to get too deep into. I mean, it's Star Wars. We're talking Mandalorian, and I do. Getting back to the series and getting back to a positive, I like, even though I don't like the way it was given to us, the info that his sect of the Mandalorians is a weird religious cult as far as other Mandalorians are concerned. That's neat. That was like a little bit of lore where would it have been delivered a little more naturally, I think I would have really enjoyed. I think it's going to make him reflect on his worldview a little bit more. I just want them to get to the point where he says, I'm going to watch over Baby Yoda so we don't have to worry about that albatross hanging around our neck anymore. But it's fine. It's all fine. Okay. Everything's fine.
I will say, actually, just to reference that thing that you mentioned, I actually genuinely like that aspect of it, where it's like the Mandalorians are not a monoculture anymore. They're not like a whole entity. They're kind of like fractious, and there are debates within it. And again, like this is one of the things that I like about the Mandalorian, as much as like it has themes or it has like things that make it distinct from other Star Wars movies, while it delivers Star Wars like continuity and references to you, is that I like the fact that it seems to take place in a world that is genuinely like fractured and at odds with itself, and like where there's this infighting and bickering. And again, it arguably, I would say, suggests like the world that we live in today, where you have all these kind of factions bickering and infighting over what's going on. I mean, not to get too spoilery or make it too political, but I mean, let's be clear here. The group of Mandalorians that appeared in this episode are dressed entirely in blue, have a female leader, and she says Mandalorians are stronger together. In case you don't get the circa 2016 subtext that the Mandalorian is suggesting here. But like, again, it's this idea that like, you need to build a meaningful coalition, which I kind of like. Again, I kind of like. I like the idea that like Favreau's going, well, okay, Star Wars has always been a metaphor for how America sees itself, how America kind of represents itself, that image kind of projected on screen. So now America is divided. It's caught in this kind of like squabbles. There's no real sense of there being a centralized authority at the moment, which is terrifying. And things are not the way that they should be. And the things that we thought we had defeated in the past, maybe we haven't as much as we would like to have. And I kind of like the idea that, the Mandalorian is actually going, well, the way in which you get past that is you build coalitions. And you build coalitions from groups that have different point of views. And you acknowledge that you can have the same goal, you can belong to the same group, you can want the same things, but believe in different ways and have different values, and kind of get past that, which I kind of like. That's the bit that I genuinely liked about episode 3 and its portrayal of the Mandalorians. I agree with Jack entirely. It would be better if it wasn't, I'm reading this off the back of a baseball card, as opposed to, like, I actually believe this. And I like Katie Sackhoff, but there's a real sense of, we need to get the dump in there quickly, so we can get to the jetpack pirate stuff, right?
And, she's old hand at just, like, straight up delivering sci-fi info dump, which is great, like, good for her. But at the same time, no, I really like that read of, like, she's the... it's really weird because like she's like the rightful female leader, and somehow her power got stolen from her by the evil guy. That's so weird.
If only there was some situation that were comparable to. I can't even think about this. I feel like we need to take a deep breath and kind of think about that for a moment. But yeah, no, I mean, and kind of even beyond that though, there's this kind of thing running through the Mandalorian which I really genuinely like, which is this idea that again, that like the universe has fallen and you have the kind of the Empire rising back up again and the threat that it represents. And this idea that like in there you have the Mando himself having to figure out how he relates to other people and like whether what he believes is really true and what happens when he meets people who believe things that are similar to what he believes but slightly different. And again, like I have my issues with the show, and I think we've all had our issues with the show in this section. But to genuinely put a pin in it and to give it praise, one of the things that I genuinely like about it is the fact that Favreau writes most of these episodes himself, and he showruns it, and he directs a couple too. But he clearly has both hands on the wheel. And you can see things and themes developing where it's very clear what the show is about thematically. So things like what it's like to be a father, to be a which is very much a Star Wars theme, but is mirrored throughout, where you have this idea, like in the first season, the assassin droid, who is repurposed as a caregiver for the baby. And it's like, in case you didn't get, that's just like the Mandalorian bounty hunter who has now been repurposed as a caregiver. These two things kind of line up. And I kind of that I have faith in, and that I'm interested in when it gets to the kind of Mandalore stuff. I'm less interested in the go to a forest moon. And by the way, I love that it's a forest. Go to a forest planet. It's like, because we did an ice planet, we did a desert planet. This week you got a break. We did a water planet. Those are from the prequels. We don't do those very often because we don't like to remind people that the prequels existed. But don't worry, next week you're going to a forest moon and you're going to meet Ahsoka Tano. And it's like, that stuff. If we meet Ahsoka, I want it to be because Ahsoka's interesting, not because she's a piece of continuity that exists.
Boom.
Yeah. I love that character.
Yeah. No, I love her too.
And like the way they have been going about introducing concepts and continuity, like Darren is talking about, has been sort of just as a dump rather than like a natural progression to maybe linking two very interesting things together. Like, I mean, why is Ahsoka important right here and now?
Synergy.
I mean, who knows? Right? But I mean, the hope is that maybe she'll continue to be as cool of a character as she has been. Like, because I'm a big fan of that character. To see her again, I think will be fun. But I just hope, justice is done for her, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I think we'll have to come back to this when we know more because we are well over time. But that's what you get when you talk Star Wars.
So you'll say next week we'll have Mando more of the Mandalore?
Absolutely. Next week.
Whoa, Darren.
Next week I'm shutting. Darren, next week I'm shutting the door on Mandalore.
Ooh.
Just because I don't want to talk about it for a week.
So don't worry. Next week we're going to talk about the Star Wars Holiday Special. You know we are.
Fuck.
But the fun one.
Damn
Let's
it.
talk. Let's put for SEO purposes. Let's put the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special in the description, and let's talk about the Star Wars Holiday Special.
I would love to talk about the Star
Let's
Wars
talk about
Holiday
the Star Wars
Special.
Wookiee porn. I want to talk about Wookiee porn.
Honestly, there's Wookiee porn. It's weird.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this must sound very weird to anybody who has not seen the Star Wars Holiday Special. To be clear, that makes sense in context.
Chewbacca's. I want to say that's his father-in-law takes time out of their Life Day celebration to watch VR porn.
Yeah. It's a musical number.
That's a thing that happens in the original 1970s Star Wars Holiday
It's
Special.
not ambiguous. Like it's not.
So where can I find this?
Nowhere Disney will let you.
Very famously, George Lucas said if he had enough free time and a hammer, he would destroy every copy that exists. Though that just made the bootleg community push it out harder. So you can find it just about anywhere. It's available everywhere because Lucas hates it so much. But in any case, I guess that's next week. Star Wars. Thank you all so much for listening and or watching this. We definitely appreciate that. Make sure, if you like these podcasts, to click that subscribe and like button for more movie-related content as we roll out more 3-minute reviews and more podcasts and more general movie stuff. But thanks and bye once again. My name is Jack Packard.
I'm Darren Mooney.
And I'm KC Nwosu.
And we'll see you later, maybe, or hear us later. Oh, I'm terrible at the intros and outros. I don't know.
Artful, masterful.
Just end with jazz.
Yeah.
Ha.